we can ask them questions. Good afternoon. Welcome to B1. Normally I'm doing this at 7 in the morning, having a study on the Bible and things like that. But today I have a special guest, Mayor Mike Chamberlain, the mayor of our great city town of Belvedere. Are we a city or a town?
We are a city.
We are a city. We're big enough to be a city. We're big time.
A small city.
A small city.
But a great city.
My wife and I joke when we first moved here, when we lived in Louisville, you drove 15, 20 minutes to get anywhere. I mean, just you went out in town, it was 15, 20 minutes to get anywhere. And now we're like, oh, that's in Rockford? I don't want to go all the way to Rockford because it's like 15 minutes, man. I don't have that kind of time. What are you, crazy? I'm going to open up my phone here so I can see anyone making comments so that we can respond and ask questions. And I don't think, somebody said you better monitor your comments. I don't think we've ever had a problem with people being mean on ours. If we do, we have a delete button, and that's what we do with those kind of things. But let me kind of introduce how Mayor Mike and I came to know each other. I don't know if you remember this. The first time we talked in your office was the first time I was going to do river baptism. And I think we talked about having scuba divers in the water. Now I realize the Kishwaukee's only, especially up at the Red Horse Bend.
4 feet deep.
Yeah, about 4 feet deep. So you got to try to drown in that thing. But I think that was the first time we talked. And then when all of the things started happening this year with a lot of the protests and stuff like that, there was a moment. I remember people were putting messages up on Facebook and stuff like that, and they're like, oh my gosh, we're going to have protesters here in town. Of course, I have a couple friends on the police force, and it seemed like there were police everywhere. And I went up and I, right there at the corner of Logan and all that, and I just kind of prayed over the city because I just wanted everyone to just kind of feel that calm and release. And then you called because we had a group that did want to have a protest here in our town. Correct. And of course, at that point, there was a lot of tension. There was a lot of nervousness. There was a lot of worry, well, what kind of people? And I asked you if I could be in on the conversation. And then we sit down with Bernard and Ray and find out that these were really actually great people that were, people that you would hang out with, that you would go out to dinner with. I mean, they were just, and we had a great talk that day, and eventually the nervousness kind of went away, and we had that great march. I got in trouble for it. I think you got in trouble for it. I think everybody did, because there really was that sense that, hey, why aren't you taking this side or that side? Are you mad at these people? Are you mad at that people? And the conversation really we came away with was we can get more talking across a table than we can screaming across a picket line.
Well, the important takeaway from the march, the walk, however you want to describe it, is we had no violence in the city of Belvedere during this troubled time.
Right.
And that is really due to sitting down, talking about issues that are important to everybody in the community. And that eliminates the tensions that escalate, particularly in a time this summer and this year have just been awful for people. There's a weight you feel every morning when you get out of bed. That of what's going on in the world, and I think we proved that we are a community that can rise above the 24-hour news cycle, come together and speak about things and resolve what are easily solvable problems without letting them spin to the point where we have unfortunate things that happen between people.
Right.
I'm grateful to the whole community. I think in retrospect, and I've had a lot of conversations with people since this summer who said, wow, you guys did the right thing. And I said, well, thank goodness. I mean, we had some trepidation.
Yeah.
But sometimes you judge people on how they present themselves to you. And we made some judgments about things. We had the whole pastors from all over the community come and talk together. And I think we did the right thing. The proof is in the pudding. No violence and new friends, and they have the Bridge Association, as they're called, have done some marvelous things in the community as volunteers, and a lot of people are not aware of that either. We were trying to procure the soil and water building with a grant to have a community minority outreach and, if you will, supplication center where we could help them with all issues Belvedere, and we didn't get that grant, but we're still trying.
Oh, I meant to ask if that ever went through. I knew they were.
We did not get that particular grant. There's another one we're looking at now, and simply as a way to include everybody in community and address the issues that we have that need to be addressed.
Yeah, and just agree. And just so you know, it's kind of funny because here we have church and we have state, right? And we have separation between us. I picked up a 6-foot
Symbolic.
table. Yeah, a symbolic separation between us. Actually, just to make sure we're socially distant and being wise about things, we're keeping everything distant here. My wife gave these out at our food pantry, these little spray sanitizers, and I can tell you this, even before all of this, the first question she asks me on a Sunday afternoon was, "Your hands yet?" Because you shook every hand in the church. Have you washed your hands? Mayor Mike has come in, and I used to do this as a 5 questions thing. Before COVID, I kind of did the book of Isaiah as sort of a passion project. I took our study group completely through chapter by chapter Isaiah, which is 66 chapters, just a mammoth book. And because of how I am, I had to study in deep and know all the archaeological context and bring all of that in. So I just finished that a few weeks ago, and now we're kind of in that, how are we going to go forward? Obviously, like everybody else, we're trying to get back to normal, but of course today we had a little blow to our normal in our church because we've had some people pop. And so today I just have 5 questions that I was going to talk to Mike about how church and state intersect. Obviously we have intersected in our jobs, and it's always been positive. It's never been I don't think we've had a negative interaction yet.
No, not that I recall.
You haven't been mad at me or anything, have
No,
you?
no.
Okay, all right, well, I've had people mad at me, so I'm just...
Well, let's discuss that for a minute.
All right, go ahead.
Anger is a useless emotion except in times of stress and defense. Then anger can fuel your survival. In a community and in a relationship, anger comes and goes. It's a natural reaction to things that you either do not understand or strike you in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so, forgiveness is something that's ultimately important. And as I have gotten more mature, I find my quotient for anger has diminished remarkably. Having watched the kids grow up, the grandkids, and now my great-grandkids, I've learned patience. And
You kind of have to, don't you?
I think if you walk around on this earth long enough, you either learn or you have spent a miserable life. And forgiveness is an important thing, and kindness to others. And you're kind to others when you kind of let them transgress and you don't lose your mind over the whole thing, right?
Right. Well, you can't have a conversation with someone who's always looking to parse your words and find you saying something wrong. Right. I one of the things that I really thought about lately, because as much as we talk about kind of the atmosphere where this cancel culture, this kind of gotcha culture, they find something you've done, it comes from a place, this is the thing, and I always try to look at both sides, it actually does come from a place where people are trying to make the world kinder and nicer and things like that, but then sometimes the way they go about that is to start searching through everything you say. And you're a politician and I'm a pastor, so I think we both get that, where people go over what you've said.
May I correct that statement?
No, I'm uncorrectable. Genuinely.
I am a public servant, and that is how I view myself. Realistically, I'm not political. I've been a registered Republican my whole life. That's how I grew up. You and I had a moment early before we started this, but I always vote for whom I believe to be the person with the best content of character for the position they're running for. I'm not always right. I try to do my homework and find out. But I more look at being the mayor of Belvedere as a management position that utilizes my experience in business and my experience in life. Truly, I think that we need to look at this idea of what politician really means. The word politic means people, and a politician you would then extrapolate that a politician is someone who does something for the people. Unfortunately, we have seen a parade of people who do not do things for several decades in this country, and it's become a thing. And this 24-hour news cycle with animosity on both sides, to me, it does a disservice. I grew up thinking that the best and brightest people served in the highest echelons of government. And to go back to a statement you made, separation of church and state. That's true. In the United States of America, however, our regard for the Almighty has always been part of our charter in our thinking. In God we trust.
Right.
People have mixed opinions about my doing an invocation. I'm going to do an invocation. To me, we pledge allegiance to the flag, and we do an invocation. And I have a mixed response. I have some people who are tickled to death that I'm willing to step out there,
Right.
But I think it's appropriate.
Yeah, and so, a couple things there. One, when you're talking about politicians being servants versus being, I don't want to say celebrities in their own right, but so here's something I found as a pastor, and this is just one of those interesting things that you find, that a pastor is at their heart a minister. You are ministering to others. Your job is about the people, right? So I pray different to God when it's him and I alone than I do when I'm in front of people, not for the show, but because what I'm praying for is them, and the words I'm saying to them matter in a different way. When it's he and I, we have a different conversation. God never calls me pastor, he calls me son, right?
Okay.
Yeah, because in his eyes, right, that's where what I have found, because I have found this in ministry too, I have found that sometimes even preachers or pastors, whenever they do the job, because there is a part of it that's a job, right? There's part of it's where I'm dealing with tax paperwork, or I'm dealing with 501c3 status. There's a job part of it. But whenever they take that and they look for a type of fulfillment from the title or position, that always goes wrong. Right? That I am a pastor because the Lord has set me to be a pastor. I'm here to minister to people. And if I ever look at the position as, you know what, I'm important and this is a thing about me and I'm going to go up in the pulpit and I'm going to say what's on my heart and what I want to get out, that never works. It's always got to be, you always have to come to this place where you're like, what does the Lord want to say to his people with me out of the way? Right? That I think in our culture, when we make any job title or anything about us, or we want to get that, it's like a gratification, right? Like I want the gratification of the position so I can show people, hey, I'm smart, I'm intelligent, I'm doing this thing, versus I'm here to serve you because this job is by nature a servant job, right? I'm here to serve the people that elected me. I'm here to serve the people I pastor.
Let's examine that for a minute.
Let's go for it.
In both of our vocations, we are very familiar with those that would self-aggrandize and become celebrity pastors and celebrity politicians. The more they get away from the calling of the vocation, whether it's to serve the people in an elected position as a servant leader or as a religious leader in the community, the further you get away, the more it warps the orbit of how we're perceived generally by the public. It's lumping everybody together. Well, he's the mayor, so he's a politician. He's the pastor, so he's you have to take every individual and judge them by their actions and how that relates to what their vocation and love and understanding in life is really about. And I think in a lot of ways there's a lot of similarities. You have to get up and talk to people every Sunday. I have to get up and talk to people every Monday. And so in that respect.
And Monday's my off day. Monday's my one day a week I take off. So.
And so, there are some similarities, but the similarity ends there. You serve a master. I serve the people. You serve the people through the words of the Lord.
Yeah. Well, I would say this too, because this is definitely that you can be divinely called to a secular profession. There are people who are divinely called of God to be welders. There are people divinely called of God to sell automobiles. There are people divinely called of God to be in a position in, you know what I'm saying, in a community, in a leadership position and things like that. I definitely believe not everyone is called to be a pastor. I believe we are all called to minister on some level. Right? Like every person who knows God is called to minister to other people. Your life is not your own. You were bought with a price. You now exist so that you can bring the light of Christ to other people. That is absolutely, and whatever profession you find yourself in, however your hands occupy themselves, there's still a divine calling on that, right?
You know what? That's an interesting thought. I think people are drawn to things, but I think at the root of it is the call came from somewhere, and the call to serve, regardless of the profession, it doesn't matter if you're the plumber or the welder or the pastor or the mayor. We're called to serve the people in our own way, and I think there is an opportunity in serving that allows you to share, which when your attitude is not about serving, you have a tendency not to have much to share that's of value.
Right. This was totally, I went over the questions before we started and we haven't done any of them yet. We have not. We are how many minutes in? We have not done a single question yet. We're about 13, 14 minutes or 15 minutes in yet. 20 minutes in. We have not done a single question. I had questions like, how did you end up in Belvedere? Because it's always my question. Everybody's always like, how did I end up in Belvedere? I was born in Tacoma and raised all over the place. And so how did you end up
Well,
here?
I'm going to be 70 in August, and it's a long story, but to make it short, I was living in North Carolina, and I was actually going through a divorce, and I had come up to visit my mom and dad. My mom and dad were transferred here with Barbara Coleman. My father was an executive with Barbara Coleman. And when they were going to build the International Center, which is now the Diocesan offices, Mom and Dad moved up here. And I would visit them from North Carolina, and previous to that when I lived in Houston. And so I had come to visit.
So this is the coldest place you've ever lived?
No, I grew up in Michigan.
Okay.
So
that's right, yeah.
Anyway, I came up to visit Mom and Dad and kind of have a cooling out period while I got used to being single. And I met Darcy, and that was 37 years ago, and I am still here. And I am...
That's 37 years, though. Who knows if it's going to work out this way.
Right. So I'm tickled to death. This is a great place to call my hometown, even though it's an adopted hometown. I love this community. I love the people here. I come from the same background stock. We came off the farm. I'm 3 generations, or 2 full generations off the farm, right? Midwesterner, a lot of those
there is somewhere out
ideas
there a picture of me and my sister riding a pig.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, for like a second. I mean, for like a second, but yeah.
So, a lot of travels in my life. I've been very fortunate to be able to see a lot of this country and some of the world. And all of it brings back the same thing. It's always good to be home, and this is home. And so, I'm very grateful that I was able to find someone to be a life partner, not just a partner, but a life partner. My kids, my daughters, my grandkids, the 5 of them, and the 3 of my great-grandkids all live within 20 minutes of me. Uh-huh. And so that is a blessing.
Yeah, you can't get away from that, right? Yeah, you'll always be back.
Yeah, so we're not going anywhere. You talk about moving away and getting out of Illinois because of this, that, and the other thing. But we're not going to move away from our family.
Half my church threatens to move to Florida any given week, right? and a couple have seriously put in house offers and things like that. So anyway, I'm like, I don't know. I've been here 5 years. There was a point at about 3 years in where my wife and I knew that when we talked about going home, we weren't talking about Kentucky anymore. Right, we were talking about, that this was home. Now Kentucky's the visit, and this is kind of where we belong. And then I've had to acclimate to being in the North. The people are different, the personalities are different, but I like it. I love the Kishwaukee River. It has become, kayaking down the Kishwaukee is like my happy place now, right?
We have so many beautiful outdoor venues. That, the Conservation District and the thousands of acres that they control. And it's free.
You know what? That was the best. As bad as the COVID summer was, the fact that when I was off, I was outside. It was a beautiful summer. We had great temperatures. And you would just go do something like, hike or go down the river or something where you could be by yourself, right? And really just had a great summer as far as the outdoors go. I still have a tan line. And it's, February, and I've still got one.
It was a place that you could go, that you could walk around without a mask on because you're not within 50 or 100 feet of anybody else most of the time, and have a mask handy in case you were. But the outdoors to me is always the most magnificent thing when you look at every sunrise, every sunset, the stars in the sky, bodies of water. It reinforces my belief and understanding of the Creator, because man didn't do that.
Amen. Amen. I always tell people the reason we baptized in the Kishwaukee, ready for this? I always tell them, I was like, listen, this river feeds into the Rock River, which feeds into the Mississippi, which feeds into the Mississippi, which hits the Gulf of Mexico, right? That means when you get baptized in this water, your old man keeps going, right? You can't go get them. They're gone. They're heading to the Gulf of Mexico, and the new person comes up, which I've always thought is just a great illustration. That anything
that's an interesting comparison,
right? That goes in the water here, it's going to the ocean. You're not getting that back, And so I do feel like there's a special, and just spiritually, there's something special about being in an area of headwaters. because we're in an area of headwaters. Rivers that begin here feed and feed and feed and then go into the Mississippi. You know, that I was raised along the Ohio, and, you know, the Ohio is just enormous, right? I mean, we heard stories about catfish as big as school buses under there, you know, and just the enormity of that. And to imagine that, you know, you could drop a stick in the water here and consider that stick could make it to the Gulf of Mexico,
sure.
right? Just an amazing thought. All right, so how has the political atmosphere in our community changed really in the last, I would say the last year or two? I think it's made a big change versus the whole 5 years I've been here. I really feel like the last 2 years we've kind of hit a curve in the change of the personality with how we deal with people who don't vote or agree or you know.
I think the 24-hour media cycle has contributed greatly to anxiety, but I also think it has pushed us all to choose up teams. The underlying stress on all of us financially, fear of COVID, of illness, of watching loved ones pass from this, of being worried about your job, being worried about where are you going to be able to feed your family. That's why another reason I love it here, because we had no food insecurity in this community unless somebody deliberately didn't want to eat.
Yeah.
And nobody lacked shelter unless they deliberately did not want to have shelter.
We gave out so much food.
Jen, Jackie from the Y and I were talking about this the other day, and a conservative estimate of how many meals that we fed just out of General Mills Park between the breakfast, lunches, and the General Mills distributions of weeks worth of groceries, those occasions, it's like 70,000 meals. The schools handed out meals. What it told me is, my goodness, there's a lot of food produced in the Midwest. And
Absolutely.
so I think we were very fortunate in this community. I saw acts of what I call heroism. And heroism to me isn't just someone jumping in front of a runaway bus, or running into a fire, which I do consider that to be heroism, but it's unselfish, kind acts of mercy every day in small ways to help somebody else's passage through that day in a better light. I saw so much of that, it's almost impossible to catalog it. It stuns the mind.
Yeah.
And so I chose to pay less attention to the news cycle and more attention to the cycle of goodness in our community. And I think a lot of people bought into that too. And I think that kind of explains the volunteerism, the generosity of our manufacturing community with all the hundreds of thousands of masks. I still have probably, 20,000 masks in boxes in my storeroom, and we gave out boxes of 50 at a time to anybody that wanted them.
Health department filled our truck up with masks, and we gave them all out. Yeah.
And I think it's unfortunate that sometimes, because of the anxiety of this, of how this was caused, and of differing opinions about the virus itself, that became part of this choosing sides, and that there again was something that we made a decision on as a community of leadership, and in this case it would be political leadership, that we were not going to force people to close. Early on, small businesses, I spoke to them and I said, if you can see your clients one at a time, then do it. Close the door, offer them hand sanitizer, socially distance, follow the rules. As far as our restaurants, I think that the initial flurry and surge freaked people out, and so when we didn't go to restaurants and we didn't go to the bar and we did follow the rules, we started to see a decline. But then when things eased up a little bit, we had another surge. But it's awful hard to follow the data. It really doesn't make sense if you know anything about math. And so I think that was an anxiety that built, and people chose to add that to their partisanship as to picking a side.
Yeah, they made it political when it didn't need to be political, right? It really was about, nobody wanted COVID, and there were people who, there were COVID deniers at first, and then they realized, well, this is a thing. And I think too, there's a natural human nature that once somebody takes a side, they can't give that side up no matter what. Right? Like there's no point in which we could say, you know what, maybe I wasn't quite right about that. Maybe I missed that. I've had to learn that. My wife would still say I haven't learned that, but I feel like I've gotten better at that. That sometimes, I'll go one way and then the evidence will change and I'll be like, well, okay, maybe I misjudged that. Let's pull back this way a little bit, this, that, and the other. I do try to keep a counsel around me, but like even as a leader, this is something a pastor taught me once that actually was. Because I was telling him, I'm here at the church and I have pastors that I call when I have issues, and I'm like, this, and he said, listen, whatever you can get as many opinions as you want, but if you're going to be a leader, you've got to make the decision. And you've got to stand by the decision. You've got to face the consequence of the decision. But ultimately, you've got to be the one that says, this or that. And we had some spirited discussions in our church. We ended up doing several weeks outdoors where we did outdoor services, broadcast on FM. Had a blast. We actually loved that. Our neighbors told us to turn up our music. They couldn't hear
Did
it.
Kevin do those broadcasts for you, Hendrickson, with his portable radio station?
No, we're a very nerdy church. We actually rented out Spencer Park.
Oh.
And actually went out to Spencer Park, had the outdoors. In fact,
Nice
I think
place to do it.
WFIR came out and covered us doing that. Because we instead of doing a potluck, we had designated servers who would hand food, and the people would go take their food back to their little family gather part, right? But yeah, we had some very spirited discussions even inside the church, and even now we have it to where. On our first service, you have to wear your mask even seated, whereas second service, you have to wear it in, but you can take it off once you're seated. But even that was kind of a compromise because I had some people that said, I won't come to church at all if you make me wear a mask. And some said, I will not come to church unless everyone wears a mask. And it was like, you're killing me, people, right? Yeah.
My take on all of that was I was never confrontational with anybody about what their belief was. Everybody's entitled to their belief. I have a tendency to look at the empirical scientific evidence and read as much as I can.
Right.
And of course, that was all over the place too. You got one set of doctors saying this. So my approach to it was, let's find who needs the help the most and how can we provide that help. And you're entitled to what you believe. You know that I went on television with Forward Boone and we asked only that people wash their hands, socially distance, and wear a mask. And we may have been able to cut short some of the things that happened, and we wouldn't have gotten to an almost a 30% positivity rate. But in the long run, we're working our way through, and we will find the answers to this that'll better prepare us for dealing with it. Another thing that always comes out of controversy and chaos is that you learn lessons that hopefully will make an indelible mark so that you're prepared a little better the next time on how to deal with that.
Right.
But I think that a major learning in my life has been no sense arguing with people, friends or not, when you are diversely opposed, because you're not going to get anywhere with it unless you just enjoy arguing. And at some point,
I have not found anyone who enjoys arguing. No, I haven't seen.
The
We're doing this on
reality
the
is,
internet, by the way.
people are entitled to their belief.
Right.
And from my perspective of what my responsibility is, I'm charged with being a uniter, not a divider.
Right.
And that is my focus and my approach to what I try to do in the community, is to bring people together for a common cause that is uplifting and good for everybody, or help somebody who needs help. To take a divisive side or a divisive stand on something, whatever the motivations are, is not my thing.
I think one of the things I've seen as a pastor too is this desire in society to punish the other person. Not to just have the disagreement, but then to punish the person that disagrees with you. I'm always like, that is, the Bible says, vengeance is mine, says the Lord, I will repay. And there have been times where something upset me, and I just had to look and say, okay, you know what? There's a Hebrew word called mizpah. And I love that word because that word means the Lord set a watch between you and me. And a lot of people will say, oh, the Lord set a watch between us, like, he's going to watch over both of us. But the actual phrase was, the Lord's setting a watch, so you know what? If you're wrong, he's going to deal with you, and if I'm wrong, he's going to deal with me.
Right. It's not up to you.
Right. And there's just a point at which you just have to say, you know what? Let the Lord set a watch. If I'm wrong about this, Lord, I pray you deal with my heart. I pray you fix me. You bring it to my attention and let me notice it and let me correct that. And Lord, if it's them, then this, keep putting that stumbling block until they figure out, hey, I need to work on this part.
Optimism trumps angst always.
Right.
Kindness trumps meanness always.
Amen.
And, you see acts of petty meanness from time to time.
I probably focus on that. You're right, because the fixer in me says, "Oh, let's go fix this thing," right? And I don't know that you can. I think you're right. I think one, you focus on the people that you have, that you can walk in fellowship with, that you can work with. That's what I do. Like, and I know
You pray for the others,
right? And I know like Ray and Bernard are watching this, right? And like that was a great thing when we had that moment. Because whereas on the news, you see people screaming at each other, we sat down and we're like, hey, we don't like this. And you're like, yeah, we don't like this either, right? And we're like, yeah, we both don't like injustice. We both don't like it. We want to work for better things. We actually want to. And you definitely get a better response. You get a better feel. You get a better society, right? And I would, of course, you know what I'm going to say, right, is before you have Christianity, you don't have values like tolerance. There was nobody who was like, hey, let's be tolerant of other cultures and beliefs before Christianity. Just my little historical perspective, that is something that comes out of the do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Okay, I don't agree with you, but I'm still going to treat you like I would want you to treat me, even if you're on the other side of the argument.
Well, you and I have the same challenge with in one respect. I have to be the arbiter, let's say at a city council meeting, of acceptable behavior.
Right.
You have to be the arbiter of acceptable behavior with your flock. And so there are times when behavior that is not acceptable for the rules, say Robert's rules, or even stronger rules than that. And you got a hand, and they gift me with something when I become elected mayor that's called a gavel.
The church uses Robert's rules too for meetings.
And yet, when I exercise those in this particular atmosphere, I have tried to be extraordinarily lenient with allowing people to have their say. But there are times when I've had to use my gavel to get people to lower a tone of voice or an attitude, just so we might be able to get back to the discussion that it's been very, very difficult. And then I'm on Facebook being mean, the mean mayor, Okay, guilty, but I'm charged with that in my position as the mayor in a meeting to conduct the meeting according to a reasonable set of rules.
Bottom line is you have to be the adult in the room sometimes, right? You have to be the one that says, this is out of order. This is the line. We can't cross it. I can definitely relate to that. We're past 30 minutes. I didn't even mean to go to this.
That went very quickly.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's 2:41. I think we started at 2:05, so we're at about 35 minutes. And I promised to only keep you 30 minutes, so now I have violated my word, and I do apologize for that.
That's okay.
I don't know. Parting thoughts.
I figured it was you that I was coming to talk to. It might go 2 hours. And
we could talk, man. But that's what I like about it, though. I like the fellowship. I like, and I think too, sometimes.
Good point. This is fellowship.
Right. It's fellowship, right? That we can sit down, break bread together. I really wanted to do this too, especially in times like these. I know we're coming up on local elections. I like people to humanize, even if you're like, hey, I'm voting for the other guy, and I'm fine with whoever you vote for. My church, I got people that vote for people I wouldn't vote for, and I'm okay with that because that's people, right?
Personal choice.
But there's still people on the other side of that, right?
It's a right of us.
Yeah, and then
Americans.
There are people like I always say, if you don't like hanging out at church, you're going to hate heaven. Right, because it's full of it's going to be full of people like that. If you don't, and even if you don't agree with, or if you don't, man, you got to humanize. You got to say, but that's still a person. That's somebody, from our theology, that's somebody Christ died for. That's somebody God said is worth the life of my only begotten Son. That person that you want to snub or be mean to or say, well, they didn't agree with me on that, so this is how I'm going to treat them. Understand, Christ died for them like He died for you, and that's we have to keep that. C.S. Lewis said that if you saw yourself on the other side of glory after you have been, in the presence of God, you'd almost be tempted to worship that person. And yet this is the same person that here you gossip about, you snub, you cut down, you cut off in traffic, right? And yet that's a person that God has built with glory inside him. I'm getting a little preachy now.
Well, theology and theocracy overlap. The United States of America is truly still an experiment in freedoms, and it's a great experiment, and we all contribute to it in our daily lives. We pass through times like this. Actually, we fought a civil war, brother against brother. we have to understand that we need to learn from history and try to understand how to make life a little easier on everybody. But it's not going to be, because it's not the human condition. But in looking at that, I think each of us, if we self-examine, can say, I can do better. I tell myself that all the time because I know I can. I'm far from being, a perfect person. I make mistakes. I willfully acknowledge that I have a lot to learn about a lot of things. At the same time, I try to share what I have learned with people in a positive, constructive way. And sometimes that ends up with an opportunity to mentor or be mentored, to praise, to coexist with people in a very positive way. And so I welcome those opportunities, and being the mayor of this community has offered me a lot more opportunities to do that, and I value that very highly.
When you said that too about the Civil War, it made me think, the first time I went to the Lincoln Memorial, and I'm reading the side of the wall, and it says both sides read from the same Bible and pray to the same God.
Right.
And then load their gun. And then the idea is, and then they load their guns and point it at one another, right? And it's one of those things that in times like these where you do kind of have that big division, understand that we are all, even this is my thought, we are all going to stand before God. Every one of us will give an account, right?
Well, my biggest and best hope is that as a community, we will continue to stand together about the important stuff, and the rest of it, we'll let it go and start over afresh.
Right. And we have a good community here.
Oh, great community.
I haven't met a person who, I can't say that. I met like 3 people I don't like in the whole town, but I've met thousands of people, and there were only 3 of them I didn't care for. So, and I kid, because I love those 3 people too. Just takes a little more loving.
I hear you. Well, thank you for this conversation today.
And thanks for joining us, guys. I know I saw a lot of you waving in there. We'll wave back to you later on. If you have any comments, we'll try to answer them online as we see them come in. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and
Happy to do it anytime you'd like to.
separating church and state, but not so much that we can't talk every now and then and work on problems together, right? So, all right, guys, we love you. Thanks for tuning in. Be real.